Hi friends, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today I'm John Zabris. Tim and I started talking about this off camera a little bit. A really interesting wrinkle. I did a video series on the Harold Fish case and why that was so important here in Arizona. We actually have a law that is the Harold Fish law in Arizona, that we changed the law because of what happened to him.
Too late for him. He had cancer.
Yeah, too late for him. But an interesting thing about how much knowledge an attorney has and how that affects your case.
To win the fight after the fight, you need help. After a use of force, I trust Firearms Legal Protection to help me win the fight for the rest of my life. From their 24/7 attorney-answered hotline to coverage for the use of all legal tools, Firearms Legal Protection has you covered. Get a discount by signing up at the link below.
So Tim, your legal career started in the law firm with Harold Fish's attorney.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to mention names, but yes, that's true. I knew Harold Fish's attorney quite well. Worked for him. I wouldn't say with him. He was a partner. I was an associate. But a brilliant lawyer. Brilliant lawyer. Yeah.
But you know, some of the things I know that if you go and look at the case and it went through the appeals process and all that stuff, is that they made a lot of hay about Harold Fish carrying a 10 millimeter and using hollow points. And why weren't those lines of reasoning objected to?
Again, I always hate to criticize a colleague, and especially a colleague that I respect.
Sure.
But I mean, you can tell me I'm a great guy, but I need to lose weight. It doesn't make it not true.
Right.
So he just had absolutely no knowledge of firearms or self-defense or shooting or any of that kind of stuff. Didn't really appreciate what hollow points were really designed to do and why they were invented and what they actually accomplish, and didn't really understand why somebody who's hiking in bear country would want a 10 millimeter instead of a smaller gun, and just didn't have any of that information that he could bring to bear. So he had to just basically sit there and listen to it, and it really backfired. It did not help his client.
It really hurt him there. And so you had a not dissimilar case.
I had another case, coincidentally, with a 10 millimeter jacketed hollow point Glock.
10 millimeter, best millimeter.
Yeah. 10 more than 9.
Yeah, we jokingly call it 40 Magnum, right? You know, so 40 Smith & Wesson.
40 Centipede was
40 Special, right?
Yeah.
And then 40 Magnum.
Yeah.
And how did that go for your client?
It didn't get to that point because I knew from pretrial discovery it was going to go that way. So what I did was every single police officer that the state put on the stand, and if you've ever been through one of these trials, the state's going to do a great job. It was a fantastically gifted prosecutor in this particular case. And he very carefully instructed all of his officers to get up there, and they were wearing their best blues, and they had all the ribbons on, and they got up there and they were yes sir, no sir, and impressing the jury, and that's their job. They were doing a great job of it. And so I got up there a little bit like Columbo, you know, the bumbling attorney, and I asked them at the end, I had just a couple of questions. Frankly, for a few of them, I had no questions except, what kind of gun is that in your holster? And objection, relevance to the case, sidebar, discussed with the judge why I was doing it. The judge allowed me to go into the questioning. It's a Glock. Do you know why your department issues a Glock? Well, most of them would say, no, I don't.
Yeah, no.
A few of them would say, well, it's my understanding it went through a bunch of tests and it was the one that we thought was the safest for our officers to carry. So it was the safest for the officers to carry. Do you know what kind of ammunition you have? And some of them really couldn't answer the question very well. Most of them said jacket and hollow point. Do you know why your department went with jacket and hollow point? Again, most of them couldn't answer the question. A few that did say, well, my understanding is there was a lot of testing. I think we piggybacked off the FBI, and it was determined that this was safest for the officers, safest for everybody in the surrounding environs, and peripherally, strangely enough, it was even safer for the person that's getting shot, because they're going to go down with fewer shots than they would if we were shooting FMJs. And so I asked that of about 3 cops in a row, that line of questioning, and was really starting to beat the nail into where it was going to bend a little bit. And the prosecutor came over to me and said, how about if we just let this go? I won't bring up anything about the gun and the ammo choice, and you can just stop doing this. And I'm like, yeah, totally cool, no problem.
Great,
and that's
we
what
can
we
just
did.
move on, I understand.
So we pulled the stinger. We didn't wait for the bee to sting us, we pulled the stinger. So that's, and that, again, if you're going to go some way that really shouldn't be, the jury shouldn't be being confused about that. It had nothing to do with motive. It had nothing to do with outcome. It was the appropriate choice for the appropriate reason. You can talk about other reasons he shouldn't have shot the guy, but that had nothing to do with it.
Right.
And I got the prosecutor to finally admit that. So we left that alone.
And so again, I'm not talking bad about any individual, right? So I say this all the time.
The lawyer that I'm talking about has 50 IQ points on me. I mean, he's a brilliant lawyer.
Well, and again, as a partner in the law firm, been through a thing or two, knows a thing or two,
absolutely.
has won a case or two.
Yeah.
But remember, so when we say, okay, criminal law is a small portion of all law, right? Most law is not criminal law.
Right.
And then within criminal law, very little of that is firearms law, and very little of that is self-defense law.
Yep.
So we're talking about such a thin slice that the number of people who specialize in that are very few.
I mean, I think you and I have talked about this before. In 3 years of law school, I think we spent 1 hour on the concept of self-defense.
Right.
Not armed self-defense, not firearms, not ballistics,
All
not any of that
self-defense.
stuff, just self-defense. I have a master's in forensic biology, so I studied a lot of that stuff in school that I wouldn't have had in law, that I didn't get in law school, and that helped me a lot, certainly helped me in my practice. But most people who are fantastically educated lawyers that are summa cum laude, that have got every loud in the book, know nothing about this stuff.
Well, and, I mean, there's only so much time in the world.
Amen.
And that's why, as an attorney, that you go, oh, gosh, I need an expert on this. I need somebody to come in. So now you got to go talk to your client.
That's
Hey,
right.
I'm gonna have to pay this guy or gal a couple $1,000s.
If you're handling a medical malpractice case, are you going to hire a neurologist or a neuroscientist to come in and help you with your, to help you with your direct and your cross?
You should.
Of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, we should be doing the same thing here.
And I do that all the time. I had a case as an expert witness not long ago that it was a civil case, and the claims that the other side were making to me were laughable.
Yeah.
But to the attorney, he was like, I'm getting this stuff in discovery and I don't know if he's right or wrong,
Yeah.
and I need some help.
And he was smart enough to reach out for it there.
And so, I literally, I'm on the phone with him because you generally do this stuff a lot over phones, work product and discovery
Right.
stuff and all that. And I literally guffawed into the phone. He really said that? No way. Is that stupid? Oh my gosh.
And here's another point to make really quickly is that a lot of people badmouth public defenders. And they'll say, if you can't afford, I guess you'll be stuck with a public defender. I will very handily concede that some of the best lawyers I've ever met are public defenders. They know the rules of evidence backwards and forwards. They know case law better than I'll ever know it. They're really great on their feet, but
They're busy.
They don't have access to the resources you just talked
busy.
about. And if it's a really high-profile murder case, the state might throw some money to the public defender's office to hire some experts, but they're strained at the seams, they're busy, they don't have access to the experts, they don't have the resources for the experts. That's where your private counsel can really shine. It's going to cost you a lot of dough, but at least you'll get what you need. But you can't necessarily get that with a public defender because of the time and budgetary constraints that they're faced with. So, you get a great lawyer almost always, but you're not going to have the support, the network around the lawyer that you can get in the private arena. That's the difference, I think. A lot of people just say, well, that public defender, he probably barely graduated from law school. Oh, no. You're being really stupid if you think that. They're great lawyers. So,
Some incredible lawyers.
Yep,
Just very few resources, a very overburdened caseload.
That's right.
And difficult to do. And part of tort reform, I think, is recognizing that, hey, we got to stop using the law to ruin people's lives. But that's a whole separate kettle of fish. But I think expecting an attorney, especially a criminal defense attorney, to be an expert in firearms is asking too much. There are some, right? And those ones that are so few that they're nationally respected and sought after. And so having somebody instead, when you go, all right, so what does my attorney know about guns? Even more than that, are they smart enough to go staff problems with the people who are, so that they can play whack-a-mole with some of these problems? Right. And if you do, you can have a much better outcome. I mean, and Harold Fish was a good man who just got railroaded by the system.
There were also mistakes that were made by Harold.
Harold made mistakes. Yeah. But not enough mistakes.
Not that he should have gone to prison over. Nope.
100%. Yeah. And listen, it was a sad outcome all the way around. Yeah. But I just want you guys to recognize this is why having great attorneys. Now, this is why we bring Tim here, right? So you're in Arizona. This is your guy. Certainly why I think things like firearms legal protection, when you've got attorneys that we know, right, that we vetted, that we go, hey, they got some knowledge here, and we have some resourcing in the background of, like, I'm a consulting expert for them, so when their attorneys go, gosh, I don't know about this, they just give him my phone number and like, hey, call John, and that's part of my job for them is to, I'm not going to go to court without getting paid, but I'll to take some phone calls and go, no, do this and go that. Yeah, I'll kick around for them a little bit and go from there. So I think people expect lawyers to be experts in everything, and I think that's not okay, because it's not going to happen. Tim, I appreciate the knowledge, man.
Always, buddy. You bet. My pleasure.